So now that we know what a radian is, we have to get comfortable with calculating trig ratios when an angle is given in radians. You guys are learning, okay? So please, please, please have your unit circle out so that you can go from there, okay? For number one, tangent of 5 pi over 6. Okay, so thinking about my x and y axes, and the denominator is 6, which means to me that it's going to have a reference angle of 30. I just have to figure out where I am on my unit circle in the quadrants. Okay, so 30 degrees, this is pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, 4 pi, 5 pi over 6. Okay, so I am in the second quadrant, 30-degree reference angle because 6 was my denominator. I know that the coordinate for a 30-degree reference angle is rad 3 over 2, 1/2. And I know that sine and its reciprocal are the only positive, so it's a negative rad 3 over 2. I know that tangent is sine over cosine. And so if you haven't memorized it yet, you can take sine and divide it by cosine. I definitely recommend that you guys start memorizing these, the tangents, so that you don't have to spend your time doing this by hand, but it should work out to be negative rad 3 over 3. Excellent. Okay, number 2, cosecant. And the denominator is 2. So I'm thinking, okay, so it's not a 3, a 4, or a 6. That means it's going to be on the positive y-axis or the negative. It's either pi over 2 or 3 pi over 2. Well, it's a negative, 3 pi over 2. Okay, so that means that I started on the positive x-axis and I rotated pi over 2, pi negative. Remember, because it's a negative 3 pi over 2. The coordinate here is 0, 1. Cosecant is the reciprocal of sine, so that means it would be 1 over 1 or just 1. Beautiful. Okay, cotangent of 16 pi. Whew, that's a lot of rotations because I'm thinking 2 pi is 360. All right, so then if I subtract 2 pi, I get 14. Subtract 2 pi, I get 12. And then 10. And then 8. And then 6. And then 4. And then 2. So this is equivalent to the cotangent of 2 pi or the cotangent of 0 pi, which means that cotangent, okay, if we think about our x and y axes, I'm going to draw them because I don't have my unit circle for you guys to see. I mean, this is going to be a lot easier. Okay, we're here at 1, 0. Cotangent is cosine over sine, which means that this is undefined. Beautiful. Nice work. I know I say beautiful all the time. You guys are used to it. If not, sorry. All right, 11 pi over 6. Since the denominator is 6, that means it has a reference angle of 30 degrees. Some of you might be catching on to this super fast, which is rad. Nice job. But for those of us that aren't, and we're still kind of bumbling through, I'm going to be super repetitive, okay, and say all of these little nuances. Negative, which means I'm going in the clockwise direction. Count with me. Pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6. 4 pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, 6 pi over 6, 7 pi over 6, 8 pi over 6, 9 pi over 6, 10 pi over 6, 11 pi over 6 in the negative rotation. And it's going to be a 30-degree reference angle because the denominator is 6. This coordinate is in the first quadrant, so both sine and cosine are positive. We know it's rad 3 over 2, 1/2, which means that the sine of negative 11 pi over 6 is 1/2. Well done. All right, cosine of 19 pi over 3. Nice. Okay, so now we're looking at denominator of 3. This means that it is going to be a 60-degree reference angle, but we're not entirely sure what quadrant we're in, which is going to determine if cosine is positive or negative. All right, well, denominator of 3. Gosh, that means that 6 pi over 3 is 2 pi. Okay, so let's take away a 6 pi over 3. So then that means we have the cosine of 13 pi over 3. That's one rotation. Okay. And then take away another 6. So we have the cosine of 7 pi over 3, which is another rotation. I'm going to take away one more rotation because I see that I can. And that leaves me with pi over 3. Sweet! We know that's in the first quadrant. 60-degree reference angle. We know that it is both sine and cosine are positive. Okay, so that means that the cosine of 19 pi over 3 is 1/2. Nice. Oh, I should have done that in green. Sorry, guys. I've been trying to match the colors with the angles. Bummer. All right. Secant. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine, and the denominator is 4, which means that it is a 45-degree reference angle. It's a negative rotation, so that means that we go clockwise instead of counterclockwise. And 9 pi over 4. Okay, right away. 2 pi, right? That's 360 degrees. That's a full rotation. 8 pi over 4 is one full rotation. So I'm going to take that away and see where that leaves us. That leaves us at negative pi over 4. Okay, I'm going to go down to negative pi over 4. This is a 45-degree reference angle. Why did I go down? Because of that. We know that in the fourth quadrant, cosine is positive, sine is negative, okay? And secant is the reciprocal of cosine. So that is 2 over rad 2, oh fudge, times, oh my gosh, rad 2 over 2, which is 2 rad 2 over 2, and the 2's can reduce, so we're left with a positive rad 2 for secant of negative pi over 4. Okay, you'll notice I'm taking away revolutions, so 360 degrees or 2 pi radians. Do that. Okay, the more you rotate around the origin, you're still going to be left with the same reference angle. Why? Because you're rotating and ending at the same terminal side. Remember, coterminal angles, they're just separated by multiples of 360 degrees or 2 pi radians. So that's why I keep taking away those rotations. Okay. 15 pi over 4. Again, the denominator is 4, so we have a reference angle of 45 degrees. I'm going to take away 8 pi over 4 because that's a full rotation. I'm still going to have the same reference angle. So if I take away 8, we get 7 pi over 4. Nice. Okay, so let's see where that's going to land us. It's a positive rotation, which means we go counterclockwise. And I'm going to count by pi over 4. So pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 6 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4 is in the fourth quadrant. 45-degree reference angle, which means fourth quadrant is C, so cosine is positive, sine is negative, and we know that the tangent of 45 degrees is 1, but since we're in the fourth quadrant, it's going to be a negative 1. Nice. Okay, denominator of 3. Dun, dun, dun. Let's see if I can use the right color this time. It is a negative, okay, and I know that if my denominator is 3, a full rotation is 6 pi over 3, because that's 2 pi converted to have a denominator of 3. All right, so I'm going to go in the negative direction. This is pi over 3. No, sorry, negative. Negative 2 pi over 3. Oh, fudge. No, negative 2 pi over 3 is here. Ignore that. Negative 3 pi over 3, negative 4 pi over 3, negative 5 pi over 3. So negative 5 pi over 3 lands us in the first quadrant. It is a 60-degree reference angle. Since it's in the first quadrant, both sine and cosine are positive. So the sine of negative 5 pi over 3 is a positive rad 3 over 2. Hopefully you guys are grasping it okay. You do have some homework with it, so you're welcome. No, it's needed. And the more you do, this is one of those skills, the more that you do, the easier it's going to be for you to recognize these patterns, to be able to pull this information and be more comfortable. Okay, denominator of 6. That means that our reference angle is 30. Good. So if my denominator is 6, a full rotation has to be 12 pi over 6. That's 2 pi. So I'm going to take away a 12. So we get the cosecant of negative 5 pi over 6. Okay, where does that land us on this fantastic Cartesian coordinate plane? Well, let's see. Since it's negative, we're going in the clockwise direction. Pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, 4 pi over 6, 5 pi over 6. So we are in that third quadrant with a 30-degree reference angle because the denominator is 6. If you're still struggling with that, you can always convert to degrees, but that's going to take you extra time. So you've got to be comfortable with recognizing these radian measures and the patterns that we've been talking about, okay? The coordinate is going to be rad 3 over 2, 1/2. We're in the fourth quadrant, or what? No, we're not. We're in the third quadrant, which means that tangent and cotangent are positive. So sine and cosine are negative. Cosecant is the reciprocal of sine, so that means that the cosecant of negative 17 pi over 6 is negative 2. Nice job, guys. Hopefully I was thorough enough for you. If you guys have questions, ask away. You know I'll answer. All right. Good luck.